Welcome to One Day One Book. Today's book is The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is a renowned British biologist, a professor at Oxford University, and a Fellow of the Royal Society. In 2005, he was named by Foreign Policy and Prospect magazines as one of the world's top 100 most influential living public intellectuals. Why would a biologist be so influential? Because Dawkins is known for being bold and provocative. He puts forward ideas that challenge the very foundation of how we understand life. His masterpiece, The Selfish Gene, is one of those groundbreaking works. In this book, Dawkins argues that the world is ruled by genes, and that every living being, including humans, is merely a puppet serving its genes. This claim ignited a huge debate across the scientific community. Supporters hailed it as a revolutionary shift in biology, a theory that redefined evolution itself. Critics, on the other hand, condemned it as not only wrong, but dangerously absurd, arguing that such a view, denying free will and describing genes as selfish, could have deeply negative effects on society. Dawkins later admitted that perhaps a better title would have been The Immortal Gene, since his real focus was on how genes, over billions of years, have shaped all forms of life on Earth. Still, the word selfish triggered controversy. It sounded too emotional, too human. So what exactly does this book say, and why has it been so influential? Today, we'll explore its three most important ideas. Part 1. Why genes are the foundation of nature. Genes are the smallest hereditary units. According to Dawkins, all living organisms are controlled by their genes. Genes, he says, are the true masters of the natural world. First, genes created life itself. Billions of years ago, Earth was covered not with life, but with simple chemical substances: water, carbon dioxide, ammonia. Then, by chance, these basic chemicals reacted and formed organic molecules. They floated in the ocean, forming what scientists call the primordial soup. And then, in another stroke of chance, a molecule appeared that could make copies of itself. The very first replicator. This replicator had no consciousness or purpose. It simply competed for resources, trying to make as many copies of itself as possible. Sometimes errors occurred during replication, creating new kinds of genes. Different replicators multiplied, forming competing populations that struggled for limited resources. To protect themselves, some of these genes learned to wrap themselves in protein shells. That's how the first living cells were born, containers that sheltered genes. Over time, some genes discovered that cooperation worked better than competition. They joined forces inside cells, forming more complex systems. These cooperative groups of genes created organisms, bodies capable of movement, digestion, perception, and eventually, thought. In Dawkins' words, these organisms are survival machines, built by genes to ensure their own survival and replication. Over billions of years, less successful survival machines disappeared, while the more efficient ones endured and evolved, from simple cells to complex animals and plants. Thus, the incredible diversity of life we see today is the result of genetic evolution. Genes not only created life, they also control how it behaves. Each gene holds detailed instructions for building and maintaining its survival machine. When an organism reproduces, its genes are passed on, ensuring the construction of a new machine according to the same blueprint. Although genes cannot think or plan, they encode strategies for survival, patterns of behavior and decision-making that are pre-installed in the organism's brain, like software written by the genes. When the organism appears to make choices, it's really just following the code its genes programmed long ago. If the code helps it survive and reproduce, those genes spread. If not, they vanish. In essence, natural selection is a grand contest among genes, Organisms have no real autonomy. They merely act out the scripts written in their DNA. That's why Dawkins concludes, the purpose of every living creature is simply to keep its genes alive. Individuals die, species rise and fall. But genes, the information itself, persist, transferring from one host to another, adapting endlessly. Genes are, in this sense, immortal. So, in summary, genes created life, control behavior, and define existence itself. They are the fundamental driving force of nature, the source behind evolution, reproduction, and the very structure of life. Part 2. How genes manipulate living beings. Dawkins explains how genes shape living organisms through 5 key ideas. Let's take a look at them one by one. 1. Altruism. Altruism means helping others at a cost to oneself. But if genes are selfish, how could altruism evolve? Dawkins argues that what looks like altruism at the individual level is actually selfishness at the genetic level. If sacrificing one organism helps more copies of the same gene survive in others, then that gene benefits overall. So even self-sacrifice can be a selfish strategy from the gene's point of view. That's why a mother might risk her life to protect her child, not out of pure love, but because her child carries her genes. Aging and survival probabilities make it more efficient for the genes to preserve the younger generation. Similarly, worker bees die defending the hive. Vampire bats share food with starving companions. All these acts appear noble, but they serve the same underlying purpose, ensuring the survival of shared genes. 2. Aggression and restraint. If genes are selfish, shouldn't animals fight to the death for resources and mates? Yet, most animal conflicts rarely end in fatal violence. Why? Because genes have evolved restraint as a smarter strategy. Killing a rival brings short-term gain, but high risks: injury, exhaustion, vulnerability to others. So, over time, species develop stable strategies, a balance between aggression and peace. This mirrors game theory and human economics. Even competition follows predictable patterns of equilibrium. 3. Family planning. If more offspring mean more gene copies, why don't organisms reproduce endlessly? Because producing too many offspring can reduce survival rates. Limited resources mean that overbreeding actually lowers the total number of surviving genes. So, through natural selection, genes evolve mechanisms that regulate birth rates, what Dawkins calls biological family planning. For example, birds may reduce clutch sizes or abandon weaker chicks to maximize the success of the remaining ones. 4. Parent-offspring. Conflict. Parents and offspring share genes, but not all of them. So even within a family, genetic interests can conflict. Parents want to spread resources across all offspring. Each child wants as much as possible for itself. Young birds, for example, cry louder or fake hunger to get more food. Some even threaten or harm siblings, a brutal strategy known as siblicide. Meanwhile, parents develop counter-strategies, like feeding in fixed order, to maintain balance. This constant negotiation of resources is what Dawkins calls the battle of the generations. 5. Sexual conflict. Finally, there's the battle of the sexes. Males can produce countless sperm, spreading genes widely with little cost. Females, however, invest heavily in each egg and in child rearing, so they must be selective. This imbalance drives 2 opposing strategies. Some species follow the sexy son or good genes strategy. Females mate with the most attractive or fit males, even if those males won't stay. Others pursue the faithful family strategy, choosing loyal partners who will help raise offspring. Even human courtship reflects these ancient dynamics. Dating rituals, long-term commitment, monogamy, all echo the evolutionary logic of genetic self-interest. Part 3. Can humans ever be free? After all this, one question remains. If genes control everything, can humans ever be free? Dawkins says yes, at least partly. He sees 3 possible ways to resist genetic control. 1. Using science to outsmart death. Genes make us mortal. Once reproduction is done, they let the body decay to make room for new life. But science may find ways to override this schedule. If we can identify and manipulate the biochemical signals that tell genes when to shut down the body, we might trick evolution itself, prolonging life and defying our genetic fate. 2. Using human willpower to defy instinct. Humans are survival machines, but unlike other animals, we can act against our programming. Some people choose not to reproduce at all, defying the genetic imperative to spread DNA. Others reject gluttony, risk comfort, or pursue art and knowledge instead of reproduction. Every time we resist a biological urge, we prove that consciousness can fight back. 3. Using culture and education to transcend selfishness. Genes may be selfish, but ideas, what Dawkins later called memes, can be generous. Education helps us understand our biological drives and make wiser choices. It allows us to see long-term collective benefits over short-term personal gain. Through culture, we can nurture genuine altruism, something nature never designed us for. As Dawkins writes, we are built as gene machines, but we have the power to turn against our creators. Science, willpower, and culture. These are humanity's tools to reclaim freedom from the tyranny of the gene. Conclusion. Let's recap. Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene tells us that genes are the true foundation of life. They created every organism, control every instinct, and use us as vehicles for their own immortality. Through altruism, aggression, reproduction, and even love, genes are always playing their silent, selfish game. And yet, humans may be the first creatures able to rebel. Through science, self-awareness, and moral education, we can choose to act beyond what our genes demand. That, Dawkins believes, is what makes us human, the only species capable of defying its own biological destiny. Thanks for watching One Day, One Book. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.